Irish Nation, your Notre Dame Fighting Irish are going to the national championship. The greatest victory in our lifetime. By far, Notre Dame pulls out an epic, instant classic, 27-24. Absolute fight for every inch. Epic victory over the Penn State Nittany Lions. Mike, welcome to the show. I know you're in LA battling fires. Hope you're doing well. Hope your friends are doing well. What a roller coaster of a week, I'm sure, for you, both with the game and everything else going on. How you doing? What were your reactions on Thursday night?
Yeah, I'll just take a second here to talk about the LA fires a bit because it's something that's really just dominating everything that's happening right now in LA. It's there was some news about these really strong winds that were coming in at the beginning of the week, but it really came out of nowhere, I think, for a lot of people. I only remember seeing news about it probably about 24 hours before it hit, and it certainly has exceeded, I think, anyone's worst expectations. Fortunately, where I live, I would say comfortably away from the fires, but they're not that far. As the crow flies, some of these fires are maybe 5 miles away. We are in an area that's very low risk, but a lot of these are areas that I visit all the time. When I have friends in town, these are areas that are great spots to take people in LA to see. It's just very scenic areas. So very devastating. I will say the Notre Dame game was a very nice break from everything that has been going on this week. It was nice to be able to use sports as a distraction, and I think what better distraction than this? This game was just moving to the game. This was, like you said, Brett, maybe probably the biggest win that I've experienced as a fan. It just seems like this season, this is a common refrain. We'll say, "Wow, what a performance! This is one of the biggest moments we've had in 30 years," and then we'll follow it up the next week, and we'll even top it. So, and the manner that we did it, it was such a roller coaster of emotion too. The game started. It seemed like our defense had settled in. It seems like we were keeping them in check. Our offense wasn't getting a whole lot going. And then at the end of the half, Penn State finally had a drive where it seemed like they were playing bully ball a bit. And admittedly, I think a lot of Notre Dame fans were overreacting to that one drive at the time. I think there was an element where people were fearful that, oh crap, now Penn State's just going to be able to do this the entire game. And then on top of that, then we had three players go down on the next drive. We had Riley Leonard, our quarterback, Anthony Knapp, our left tackle, and then Rocco Spindler at guard. So this was a scenario where it felt like everything was potentially going to collapse. The injuries were really getting to us. Insert Steve Angeli, and he really calmed the nerves. Got his 3 points. It's just 3 points, but I think that psychologically those 3 points really helped the psyche of the team. We got to halftime, made incredible adjustments. I would say mentally I would not say that I was necessarily optimistic that we were going to be able to completely turn it around, but that was one of the most impressive turnarounds I've seen at halftime. We're going to get into this as we analyze the game more, but the adjustments were off the charts. And even after doing that, it was still a lot of back and forth. Credit to Penn State, they responded, and this was a classic game for the ages, just back and forth, and then we won it in an absolutely stunning fashion. This is not the type of game that Notre Dame has won in the last 30 years. I think my reaction, I was just ecstatic like everyone else. Brett, you FaceTimed me and a few other people, and everyone was just, I have not seen as big of smiles on our faces as I did on that call. But yeah, incredible win. Great to follow up the win against Georgia with another huge win. That's two New Year's Six bowl games in the stretch of about a week after not having any for about 30 years. So just another big win. And now we get the opportunity to play for a national title. Crazy where we've gotten after the low points of this season.
It's amazing how many narratives were in this game. We're going to try to cover as many of them as we can, but both for Penn State and Notre Dame, there's advanced metrics you could talk about till you're blue in the face. There's cool individual moments you could talk about, like you mentioned, peanut butter and jelly time, like so many moments in this game and in this season and in the lead up to it. And so we're going to try to touch on as many of those that we can in this show, but it made for such a great, entertaining moment for college football fans. And if you're Notre Dame fans, this is what you live for. Like this game, this is why you ride through the losses. This is why you ride through 4-8 2016. This is why you ride through the Charlie Weiss years. It is for these moments that don't come around forever. And it's why, every single year there's going to be 133 teams that don't win a championship, and there's going to be one that does. And it's living through those losses, living through the ups and downs of sports for that night, for that moment, for those 4 hours with your friends, family, however you were watching the game. I just, it was one of the most fun nights of my life. It was it was just my wife and I sitting in our basement, texting and calling friends and family throughout the game. And it was just pure, exciting, fun. And honestly, I think I would have really fond memories of that game, even if we came up short. And then when we win, it's like, I'll never, ever forget this night. Um, Win or lose next week, I sure as hell hope we give everything we got against Ohio State and bring home a national championship. But for right now, I think every single Notre Dame fan just needs to relish in how much fun, exciting football we've had to cheer for this team. We'll try to cover as much of that as we can on the show. Let's start with the advanced stats. I actually think we'll probably spend less time talking about stats than we maybe have in any show this year. We've got some narratives for you. We have some film breakdown, which I get is a little hard in a podcast format, but we really broke down some of the key plays of the game. And as we go throughout this, we'll try to narrate exactly what went on, kind of double click in some of those moments. But we said going in, this would be a coin flip, and boy, was it. The post game win expectancy for Notre Dame was 59%. Like, yes, we won this game 27-24, but it could have went either way, of course, until the final moments. And it's not like any team had a bunch of unlucky breaks. It's not like any team, sat and outgained the other by some huge yardage, but because of fluke stuff or missed field goals or whatever, they weren't in it. This was two locked in football teams playing at a high level, and it showed. Um, the success rate for staying on schedule is a virtual tie. Notre Dame 49%, Penn State 46%. So pretty good job by both offenses staying on schedule. Havoc, Penn State won the Havoc battle. 20% Havoc rate for Penn State versus just 8% for Notre Dame. But what I'd say is not all Havoc is created equal. Our 8% Havoc was 4 sacks. We actually didn't generate a lot of pressure. We only had a 30% pressure rate on Drew Aller, but we converted those into sacks 37.5% of the time. We talked about this going into the game, both Drew Aller and Riley Leonard, very good at not taking sacks. In this game, Drew Aller took 4 sacks on not that much pressure, so really big disruptive plays when Notre Dame got it. And then on the other side, credit Penn State. Like, Abdul Carter was the best player on the game. And I get it, we had a beat up offensive line, but he absolutely destroyed Emil Wagner. Tosh Baker came in relief, and I thought hung in there, but he got beat several times. And, so credit Penn State. And then the other way where Notre Dame won the game was explosiveness. We were just the more explosive team. Anais Williams with a big catch. Jane Greathouse with a huge play. We'll break that down later. Mitch Evans had a big game. And Penn State didn't have a single play over 25 yards. There was no moment in this game where Penn State had an explosive play that really flipped the outcome of the game. Notre Dame had 3 of them. Even in the turnover battle, we lose that one 2-1, but hung in there. And I think we forced a field goal after the first turnover. Obviously, the last one for Penn State, we'll get into. So I think this is an absolute coin flip. I think anyone who's trying to dunk on James Franklin in this game, I get it now. There's he's won in whatever against teams in, top 5 AP teams. Well, guess what? Top 5 teams have a 90% win percentage. They average going 11-1. They average being 1-loss teams. Everyone loses to top 5 teams. That's why they're top 5 teams. So I get it. You can dunk on James Franklin that he's not Kirby Smart, or he's not Nick Saban, or he's not whoever else you want to put on that list. But no one, it's like people expect that he should be 10-10 against top 5 teams. No one's 500 against top 5 teams. That's why they're top 5 teams. And so I think the narrative about Penn State in this one is a little harsh towards them. I thought that was a great football team that was a play away from being in a national championship. And I just feel really lucky we're on the other side of it. So, Mike, I thought we'd spend a little time just on areas where we got to tip our hat to Penn State. And they were just a great football team and did some really good things in this game.
Absolutely. So we mentioned in our preview that Penn State, an area that they were particularly effective at, was generating a high success rate, but explosiveness, not their forte, not an area that they've really utilized to generate a lot of points this year. So to their credit, for their touchdown drives, they were able to execute long drives in several instances without mistakes. And the one that comes to mind in particular is the one at the end of the half. So for a college team, that's a tall order to go 10, 12, 14 plays downfield, not make any critical mistakes, not allow havoc plays that just kill the drive and convert for a touchdown. So that was a key for us in this game. We thought that if we forced them to have to march all the way downfield, it was likely that they would make a mistake. There are several big instances in this game. They didn't make these mistakes. They went downfield and they did make mistakes. So you got to tip your hat to them. Fortunately, they didn't do it enough to where they were able to win, but they definitely did it several times and had very impressive drives. Defensively, they had 2 interceptions on Leonard. They kept him uncomfortable for much of the game, a 41% pressure rate. Look, a lot of that was Abdul Carter. Coming into this game, it was a big question mark about how healthy he would be. He was tweeting Darth Vader videos, seems like every day, and that was amping up the Penn State fan base. I honestly, I know his shoulder was wrapped up, but if he was banged up, it really didn't seem like it had much impact at all. He was as advertised. I was texting one of my buddies that the impact of someone like Abdul Carter is similar to someone like one of the Bosas, right? He's that impactful. He's just a total game wrecker. And that's exactly what he was today. I think if Abdul Carter was not healthy this game, we're probably looking at a different ball game. I think Notre Dame we probably would have won by a more comfortable margin. So yeah, credit to Abdul Carter. The guy certainly looked like a top pick in the NFL draft. Looked like someone who could go top 3 overall, honestly. Another big element here with Penn State is we mentioned how Notre Dame psychologically, how we're able to rebound after taking a big punch from Penn State at the end of the first half. Well, look, Penn State, they took some blows from us when we re-grabbed momentum, and they were able to respond to our answers. So this is a team that didn't back down. Both teams are very similar. They're just this did end up being the rock fight that we expected. Both teams neither back down. They keep it close. That's exactly what Penn State did. So I was impressed with them from that standpoint. Another key aspect that we called out going into this game was the run game. We were hopeful that we'd be able to, I guess, get some push there, be able to get some production out of it. And that really wasn't the case. We were, I guess, maybe skeptical that we would be able to generate a ton, but I think Penn State certainly limited it more than even I expected. We had 3.5 yards per carry. Riley Leonard basically got nothing. Price was heavily limited. Jeremiah Love actually had some pretty solid numbers, but he was limited this game. So it's not like he was carrying the ball a ton. He obviously had that notable touchdown run where he essentially ran over like 5 people to get the touchdown. That's a highlight that's going to live in the history of Notre Dame for years to come. So look, Penn State, their defensive front was as advertised, probably even better, honestly. We only had 1 yards after contact. So an area that we had been able to excel at this year was our guys would break tackles and be able to break off big runs after getting hit. That didn't happen this game. So we didn't get much push from the offensive line. And then on top of that, they weren't giving us a whole lot of yards after contact. So yeah, tip of the cap to Penn State from the run defense.
Yeah, and I thought, they called a great offensive game. A ton of misdirection. They utilized play action really well. They utilized the screen really well. They had 10 attempts on play action or screens, and they completed 9 of them for 120 yards. Like when we talk about creative, modern college football offenses that are well balanced between the run and the pass, they drew up a really good game plan. They had 5 jet sweeps. They had 10 other runs outside the tackles to the perimeter. Like they were doing, I don't know if you caught it on the broadcast, but they were doing a double clap. And they were mixing up a double clap snap versus a single clap. No, it was not clap on, clap off. It's the clapper infomercial. And it was really disrupting the timing of our blitzers. Like our blitzers would come running and try to time the first clap, and they went on second clap, and we had to like pause and then kind of like jerk and restart our blitz. So they were doing a lot of adjustments, tempo changes, a lot of different things that I thought offensively was just great college football. Like it's the type of stuff I love to see from our team, and they were executing it really well. You mentioned tackling. We thought this was an area that might be their Achilles heel. We only forced 7 missed tackles in this game. We thought it could have been a weakness for them. Boise State broke over 20 tackles in the last round, and they tackled exceptionally well. For context, by the way, Penn State forced 15 missed tackles by Al Golden's defense. That's a 17% missed tackle rate. That's actually not horrible. That's actually pretty average. We're used to something more like an 11, 12% missed tackle rate. So in any given game, we're probably hoping for about 10 missed tackles, 15, definitely on the higher end. So, just a very clean game by Penn State. Mike, the last thing that, and then we should move on from Penn State and talk about our narratives, but I do think they deserve us starting here. And I think it gives really good context for what Notre Dame accomplished by calling out how good of a game they played. I thought you and I were debating this, had a different take. I thought Drew Aller was pretty unfairly criticized by the media during and after the game. and on a couple of angles, their wide receivers stunk in this game. Like, they got zero separation. And I get Leonard Moore, Christian Gray, Xavier Watts, Adon Schuler. I mean, this is the best secondary in college football. But Drew Aller had one person to throw the ball to, and it was Tyler Warren, and no one else was getting open. And I get it. He cannot throw that interception at the end of the game, and it's the play everyone's going to remember. We will break that down later. But I didn't actually think it was that horrible of a decision. I know they talk about never throwing across the field or against your body, and Greg McElroy on the broadcast called that out. But Greg started applying that to you can never throw in the middle of the field late on a play. But it was his third progression. Like, he was under pressure, but it's not like that was a scramble breakdown drill. That was just his third progression. And honestly, like, you just can't misthrow that ball right there. I get it. But Christian Gray made one of the most absurd diving catches. Like we got to make him a wide receiver if he's got hands like that. And if Aller just throws a better ball that's not leading it out in front where the corner had leverage, and he plays it to the wide receiver's back hip where the wide receiver had leverage, it wasn't like an absurdly like, oh my God, how did you not see that guy in coverage? Like, it was a contested but like available throw. And it's that or take a sack. Like, I get it was a big mistake. I just thought Drew Aller hung in there against a really, really good defense and played okay. I'm curious your thoughts on that one, though, because I know he, of course, was getting, lit up every which way you looked about, really a devastating mistake for Penn State at the end of the game.
So I agree with you that he was unfairly criticized in the sense of how extremely aggressive the media was in criticizing him. So look, I think the criticism is fair, but they were the first question they asked when he was in the press conference was basically like, "What the heck was that? What are you doing?" I thought that the way he was criticized was similar to what you would see with an NFL quarterback, someone who's been in the league for a long time and made a terrible interception at the end of the game in the playoffs. Brett, you mentioned Brett Favre, his interception late in his career. Had a
last pass as a Green Bay
Yeah.
Packer in overtime against the Giants at Lambeau. Like, okay, criticize that all you want. Like, it was career-defining moment for Favre to end his, Packer tenure.
Definitely. So I think for an NFL quarterback in that situation, being crucified to the extent that Brett Favre was, I get that. At the end of the day, Aller is still, I get that he gets NIL money, but he's still a college kid, right? So I feel like going after them with that same fervor, to me, something doesn't quite sit right. So I thought that they were a little over the top with how much they were criticizing him. But I do think the criticism was fair. And I think if this were just a standard play in the second quarter, I think that throw is, look, I don't think it's like the worst throw of all time. But I think given the situation that they were in, you can't rush a throw. If you're feeling rushed, you can't force a throw in. And that's exactly what he did. And I think that's inexcusable from that standpoint. I think you have to keep your wits about you a little bit more. You have to know the situation that you're in.
Yeah, take a sack, go to overtime.
Exactly. So I think the situational awareness was lacking there. But credit to Christian Gray. Like you said, it was a terrible decision by Drew Aller, but it was also an incredible play by Christian Gray. Diving catch. He's been absolutely clutch this year. He had the pick 6 against USC that really helped seal that game. So whenever we've needed a really big play, Christian Gray has often been the guy that has done that. I think otherwise, Aller, you're right, Brett. It was a tough situation for him to be in. His receivers were really not giving him much. It was just the tight end Warren, who was phenomenal, by the way. But aside from that, I don't, even like when you're contextualizing all that and then you're giving the context that Notre Dame's secondary is phenomenal and we're making them uncomfortable all night, there were still a lot of throws that just were inaccurate. He had that one throw to Singleton that should have been a touchdown. Singleton probably should have made that catch, but it was low, not placed well. He had two other throws that were bad decisions that should have been interceptions. The one that he threw into the triple coverage, no question that was an awful decision. And he's lucky that he got a pass interference call from that. So I thought that even with the lack of production from receivers, even with the fact that we made him uncomfortable, I was not impressed with him at all. I thought he was making bad decisions. I thought he was inaccurate. And his Pro Football Focus grade reflected that. He got a 36.6 passer grade, which is abysmal. And he was 29.7 under pressure. These are grades where if you did this 2 games in a row, you probably get benched, honestly. That's about how bad it was. So Aller, look, there's a lot that you got to keep in mind as to why he was so uncomfortable, but this was about as bad a performance as he's had as a quarterback at Penn State.
It's pretty interesting. So those are all great points. He was their worst graded player on either offense or defense. Interestingly, on offense, the other 4 of 5 worst grades were his wide receivers. Like, so whether it's Drew Aller, whether it's the wide receivers, like he missed some open throws in the first half too. So
Yeah.
I get it. Like he certainly didn't play a good game. The other big thing I want to talk about was vibes at halftime. And this is one where I've got some text threads I am going to save and remind my friends, including you, Mike, and some of our other friends, for a very long time about vibes at halftime. It didn't feel good. I think across the Notre Dame fan base, if you're on Twitter, if you're talking to friends and family, if you were listening to the broadcast, for sure, they were using words like Notre Dame's getting dominated. And even if you take out the Angeli drive, it was 10-0. Like, I get it. 10-0's not where you want to be, but 10-0 getting the ball back at the half, you go score, it's a one possession game. Like, all right, you're in it. And, the yardage, we were really one drive behind. The yardage at the half was 122 to 194. We got the ball back, went and scored, and we then had a yardage advantage. So it really felt like we were one possession away from being in that game. And what I talked about the most with friends and family that I was texting and talking to at halftime was that we were forcing them into 14-plus play drives. Their field goal was 14 plays for 55 yards on a short field from an interception, and they had 0 explosive plays. They needed a 4th down conversion on that drive. And on the next drive, they needed 15 plays to go 90 yards, needed another 4th down conversion, survived an interception, get called back. Like, I get it. Tip your hat. That is awesome execution. But that is not a sustainable way, especially in the college game. There's just too many times where it's too difficult to execute 15 plays in a row with a bunch of 19, 20-year-old kids between penalties, tackles for loss, literally anything getting you off schedule. And Penn State's not getting points on the board. And so it felt like, hey, tip your hat. They grinded out 10 points over 2 massively long drives where they made 0 mistakes and still couldn't generate like a 10, 15-yard play to like actually help speed things up. Like, they still had to go 5 yards at a time, 5 yards at a time, 2 yards at a time, 7 yards at a time. And so it felt like our offense needed a kick in the butt, but their offense wasn't going to blow out Al Golden. Their offense wasn't figuring out something. I thought what they really did to execute on that was go no tempo. And it really threw off the timing of our blitzes. It threw off the timing of our subs. It felt like it got us on our heels a little bit. But once we slowed down, caught a breath, made an adjustment, we were back, locked and loaded, and slowing them back down, especially tightened up in the red zone. And then, of course, that was aided by Steve Angeli coming in. Of course, that was aided by him. I thought you said it really well, Mike. Calm the nerves, got our passing game going a little bit, showed, hey, you can't just load up 8 in the box and stop the run. Like, we will make you pay for that. I thought it got a little confidence and mojo going for the wide receivers. Even when Leonard came back in, it felt like everyone just had a swagger to him. Like, okay, we can go knock these guys off the line of scrimmage, get open, and catch the ball and go move down the field. And so I thought that end of half drive was very big for momentum. And then we came out and did what we've done all year and won the middle 8. So I thought the vibes at halftime, I get it. It was such an epic, classic second half. I don't think that first half was as bad as a lot of Notre Dame fans want to make it out to be. We were, one drive out of the way, one big play out of the way, one interception not being called back out of the way. And it felt like Penn State was grinding out what they were producing, not bending us over, and marching down the field. I wanted to move into another section, and Mike, maybe we go back and forth on this one. I think we wrote down seven things here where it was moments that advanced stats cannot define. And there were a lot of them in this game where there were just some awesome individual moments and awesome team moments by Notre Dame. Maybe we just go back and forth on these. I'm curious, which one of these do you think stands out as the moment you are just always going to remember in this game?
I think you got to start with Jeremiah Love. I already called it out. I'm going to call it out again. Just ripping through defenders for that touchdown. Someone that we know was not fully healthy. He said that he was not going to hurdle anyone going into this game. And he did it twice this game. So he hopped over a defender on this touchdown and then bullied a couple other guys to get in. You mentioned that Penn State only had 7 missed tackles. I feel like Jeremiah Love must have accounted for
4 on that play.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it a missed tackle if he's just dragging them on their back? Like maybe that's actually not a missed tackle yet.
Yeah, I was wondering that too. He also did have that one hurdle on that other play in the game, which was just again another just incredible highlight reel type play. Didn't pick up big yardage, but that's an image that you put on a poster. Him just leaping over a defender. So Jeremiah Love, that touchdown though, I think that play is really a microcosm of this game. Just this team is going to fight. They're going to battle. They're not going to give up. They're going to scrap for every single yard that they can possibly get. And that's exactly what Jeremiah Love did. And as I mentioned, he was injured, which is just kind of makes this point hit home even more. A guy who's beaten up, banged up, really putting his body on the line there and makes a heck of a play. I think the defining play of this game. There are a few plays that I've been as juiced up for is this one. I was probably jumping off my couch when he did this. So I'll start with that one. That seems like the obvious one to me.
So I thought a guy deserved the game ball for one play in this game. And I said it when it happened. I was jumping up and down when it happened. And then when I was talking about good vibes at halftime was only because of Billy Schrauth. After Steve Angeli, we're moving down the field. It's like, all right, we got things going. Steve Angeli takes a strip sack fumble, and Abdul Carter landed on it. Like Abdul Carter had 2 paws on that football, and Billy Schrauth jumped in there immediately and ripped that ball away and got it back for Notre Dame. And that just should have been a turnover every time. They're All-American best player on the field. And Billy Schrauth just said, nope, I am individually going to make sure my team hangs on to this football, and ripped it away and fought for it in the scrum pile. Credit the rest of the offensive line for jumping in too. I think we had 3 guys on top of Abdul Carter before he could say Abdul Carter. And I thought that moment gave us the chance to make it 10-3. I think there was still 45 seconds left, and that ball was around the 45 yard line. If we turn it over there, Penn State has a chance to go get points. I mean, if we're down 13 or 17 nothing at the half and we just turned it over, now you want to talk about momentum. Like now you want to talk about this game starting to feel like it's getting away from us. So I thought that Billy Schrauth moment was one of those, no one's going to put that on a highlight reel. No one's going to talk about that like Jeremiah Love, but it was just a gritty, tough, high IQ, play through the whistle, play through your training, play through what your coaches tell you when that ball's on the ground, get after it. Don't get your head down. Don't go, oh, we turned it over again. No, like go execute what you're supposed to execute when someone else on your team messes up. Have their back and go fix it. And I thought that play by Billy Schrauth was so defining of this team and of the resilience that they were going through. So I thought a huge moment for Notre Dame, and he just gets my he gets my game ball if I'm in the locker room.
Totally. We mentioned how the nerves were just flying off the charts at that moment in the game. If Penn State recovers that fumble and then potentially quickly moves downfield and is able to get some more points, it really does feel like the game would be totally blown open. And look, you don't want to overreact. As we mentioned, we were probably, I think emotionally, a lot of fans were overreacting to what Penn State did near the end of the second half. If we don't recover that fumble, I think that just, it puts those nerves into hyperdrive, and maybe we respond in the second half, but it seems like it would probably be a bit less likely. Next guy for me.
Sorry, one other interesting thing on that. Emil Wagner in the stat sheet got credited with a fumble recovery. I've watched the play 10 times. Like Billy Schrauth ripped it away. I don't know who handed the ball to the ref and somehow Emil Wagner got it. So that's actually been the most amazing part. Like offensive linemen are not building their careers around fumble recoveries, but Billy didn't even get the credit for it in the stat sheet. And he's the one that, like, whether it was him or Emil, I don't know who handed the ball to the ref, but I thought that was another interesting part to that history where, like, I'll never forget Billy Schrauth did that. The stats will never, ever remember it.
Let's launch a campaign. Credit for Billy. Just get it going. All right, so moving on to the next guy, closely associated with your Billy Schrauth pick. That's Steve Angeli. Comes in after Riley Leonard's hurt, after Anthony Knapp is hurt, after Rocco Spindler is hurt. So as we've talked about this several times already in this podcast, things were not looking good. Steve Angeli comes in, ice in the veins. He does take that sack and fumbles it, but still doesn't miss a beat after that. Gets the passing game going, 6 for 7 for 44 yards, gets us in a position to get 3 points. And really, as I mentioned, you can't understate the importance of just getting the team to take a deep breath after that. I think once we had that, I think if you're Notre Dame, you go into the locker room feeling like, okay, look, that could have been a whole lot worse. We're definitely still in this game. We get the ball back in the second half, and they had one drive, but other than that, like let's take a more sober approach here. We were generally hanging in there. If we make some adjustments, this is still very much a winnable game. Can't overstate the psychological impact of what Steve Angeli did there.
Totally. And the other, my next one I want to call out that I've been talking about a lot this year, he's from my wife's hometown, so no surprise we're going to do another Salisbury, North Carolina shout out. Mitch Jeter. Like, what a roller coaster season. We've talked about it a lot on this show. He just wasn't healthy. He's a great kicker. I hate that they keep, talking about Mitch Jeter being 6 for 12 in the regular season. Well, look, he wasn't healthy, and we didn't have a backup, and so we're running him out there with 1.5 legs. That's kind of hard being a kicker, and he comes in 2 more massive kicks in this playoff. He has really been a difference for Notre Dame here in the playoff run. We win this game by 3 points, and he has 2 field goals. Like, that's a huge moment. Ice in his veins with the 41-yarder game winner. And look, like, you want to look at other teams. The best kicker allegedly in college football is Texas's kicker, last name Auburn. He missed 2 huge chip shots against Arizona State. I think he missed another one in the SEC championship game. And I'm not taking anything away from that kid. Sounds like he's a great kicker, probably going to have an NFL career. But I'm just saying, like, it is so easy to remember kickers for their missed field goals. It's so easy to sit and rewatch Mitch Jeter getting blocked against NIU, but that kick never had a shot from 62 yards on a low line drive, and our entire offensive line got mauled for the second time in the game on field goal blocks. So I think Mitch Jeter, just another example of this team's resilience, of this team hanging in there, of this team clicking at the right time. Really, really happy that Jeter was able to have just a massive moment in the college football playoff and has the game winner. Like, you can't draw it up any better if you're a kicker than having the game winner in the playoffs.
Definitely a guy who unfairly has gotten a lot of criticism this year. He's been hurt, so his field goal percentages haven't been what you would like, but hung in there, as you mentioned, Brett, and kicked the biggest field goal for Notre Dame in at least 30 years. Nails it. So I was ecstatic to see Jeter hit it. They showed his dad videoing the kick as it was happening live. A lot of people in the media, the broadcasters, were mentioning how they're stunned that a parent would be able to just kind of hang in there and watch that. They were saying that they'd have to cover their eyes in a moment like that. But just an incredible moment for Jeter, for his family, to be able to experience something like that. The next point I'm going to make here, it's along the same vein of just the team hanging in there, being able to weather all these hits. That's just us surviving so many injuries. We mentioned Riley Leonard. He went down, came back. Anthony Knapp went down, didn't come back in the game. Spindler went down, didn't come back. And then Tosh Baker and Charles Jagasaw came in. Jagasaw, he was originally supposed to be a starter this year, supposed to be one of our best offensive linemen coming into this year, potentially a future first-round pick, that type of potential. Got injured before the season started and hadn't played at all this year. So he comes in, plays well, fills in at guard, and graded out extremely well. Didn't miss a beat. Tosh Baker, look, he was in a tough situation. He didn't, I'll be honest, he did not grade out well, and he allowed some pressures, but he didn't make a critical mistake that really cost us. So while he certainly was struggling at times with the Penn State defensive front, which anyone would. He held in well enough to where it didn't cost us big time. So look, I think that's just a credit to the team here how they hang in, and it's a reminder. Like we had some injuries this game on the offensive line, but we're also down three starting offensive line from opening day. We're down three starting defensive line as well from opening day. We're down Benjamin Morrison, Howard Cross. He's playing, but he's not 100%. Jeremiah Love, he's not healthy either. We talked about him extensively, how he just muscled his way, even though he was injured to a touchdown. It's just impressive the grit that this team has. We're down so many players. I can't imagine any Notre Dame team that I've watched since I've been a fan that would be able to hang in here like this. I just remember us playing Clemson, we lose one player, and then everything completely collapses. We've lost countless guys already, key players, guys that have NFL potential. And this team just keeps moving on, and the drop off really isn't that significant. It's remarkable. And I'm glad that the broadcasters and the media have been catching on to this a little bit more, because I would say earlier in the playoff, that was a theme that maybe we weren't hearing as much as we should have. But I felt like in this past game against Penn State, it felt like they were calling it out more. I feel like I'm hearing pundits talk about it more. They're just talking about how this is such a gritty team. This is a team that will not quit no matter what.
Yeah, and Jug us saw with our best O line grade, and we called this out on the last show in New Orleans. I kind of bumped into who I then found out was Charles's mom and grandparents, and they were, grinning ear to ear that someone wanted to talk to them. We talked about how he was finally cleared to play, but was he bummed that he couldn't play? And his answer was, nope, he just wants his teammates to win. And if he's cleared to play and that means he has a shot to help out in any way, shape, or form, like he's just really excited to do it and is just so excited. Anthony Knapp has played so well in his place. And then in this game, with that mentality, that selfless mentality, Charles Jugasa gets a chance to come in and played really good football after not playing in a year. Just crazy stuff. The last one I wanted to call out was Jalen Sneed. I thought statistically a really okay game for Jalen. Had a couple of big missed tackles that hurt us. Did pretty well in coverage. But he had two, I thought, huge moments in this game where he doesn't get the highlight reel credit. One was on a 3rd and 2. They run the ball to Katron Allen, and Sneed just completely blew up his blocker. Like Jalen Sneed absolutely dominated the play, forced them to reverse direction, and then ran away from Sneed, got back to the line of scrimmage, but had no chance to convert the first down. They punt the ball. We go back down the field and score. And that's right when we had just scored to tie it up at 10-10. We march right back down the field and go up 17-10. And that 3 and out is only made possible by Jalen Sneed just playing smart, high IQ football and flying to the ball. And then his one pressure of the game in pass coverage was the pressure that forced Drew Aller into the game-ending interception. We'll break that down later, but I thought Jalen Sneed just had a huge, huge impact on this game in a couple of big ways that don't show up with a lot of statistical credit. And I think that's just been the DNA of this football team. Mike, I want to get into coaching, adjustments, matchups, things we did in this game. And I think same thing. We jotted down 5 year. I think it maybe just makes sense to bounce back and forth. I thought the first to second half adjustments were really impressive. I followed Dan Orlovsky on Twitter, now known as X. I'd strongly encourage everyone to go and follow Orlovsky. I think he does really good, detailed film breakdowns that are easy to digest. And he pointed out something in the second half that we started running double pulls of our offensive line on run plays. So pull means you've got 5 offensive linemen. Let's say rather than the left tackle trying to block on the left side, as soon as the ball's snapped, the left tackle will run over to the right. So he will pull behind the lineman and go to help block on the right. Slower developing play, but a pretty effective technique to kind of go add more linemen to one side and hope that running back can get behind them and the defense can't, catch up to you. We started pulling doubles, which meant we would send a left tackle and a left guard, or maybe the left tackle and the center, or maybe the left guard and a tight end. We started showing double pulls, a wrinkle we didn't show once in the first half. We did it on 3 of 4 straight plays. In the fourth one, we didn't do it. We still just did a single pull. And it was a package that Penn State hadn't seen. They clearly weren't ready for. We went no huddle and didn't sub, so Penn State couldn't get a different team of or packages in the sub they wanted to. And then we slowed it down and we immediately went through the deep pass on the wheel route to Ainias Williams in a coverage matchup we were seeking. So I thought a great halftime adjustment. It's classic Mike Denbrock of waiting on something, seeing if there's a wrinkle, and then just go exploit it for points. Go check out Dan Orlovsky on X if you want to see the video. But that was the first one to me that really stood out, that when we talk about that momentum needed to change, our defense was doing their job, our offense was sputtering. Denbrock had to go and find a way to put his team in a position to score a touchdown. He did it. And we came right back out. We made it look easy. We tied the game up. And then you got a football game to go play.
Absolutely. And then another big adjustment here was we targeted their weak pass defenders. So, example, Kobe King, player that we actually called out last week as someone who is weak in pass protection. Well, he was targeted 5 times for 5 catches for 66 yards. So we were running certain plays to try to expose him, to try to put him in one-on-one coverage, and it worked like a charm. Put our receivers in a great position, and we were able to exploit it. Jalen Reed, free safety, but a run stop specialist. We also targeted him 4 times for 4 catches. So that's just the level of detail that you get with exceptional offensive coordinators like Mike Denbrock. It's like trying to find any advantage that you can from the defense, and that's exactly what we did here. So impressive nuance to what Mike Denbrock was doing in this, particularly in the second half.
Yeah, and I thought the other thing, and this stays on Denbrock, of just not being stubborn. It felt like we would play a lot of games in the Brian Kelly era where we would then go up against a really highly talented team, and we would try to do exactly what we would do against average opponents. And we would RTDB ourselves and just keep running into a brick wall. I remember a couple of Georgia games in particular that always stand out to me where it was just like, what are we doing? Like, I know the run up the middle just isn't working. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Can we stop calling HB dive? Because it's not working. It might against UVA, it might against Pitt, it might against whoever else in your schedule, but against this talent, HB dive's not working. Can we try something else? And look, we called 38 run plays in this game, and we called 35 pass plays. And so, like, it was very balanced. This isn't like we went, throw the damn ball mode. But I will call it out. We had 8.6 yards per attempt passing. We had 2.5 yards per rush. I think it was a little over 3 if you take out the sacks. So our passing attack was way more effective than our run attack. And we didn't just say, yeah, but you know what? We got to get Jeremiah Love the ball 20 times because he's Jeremiah Love. Or, yeah, we just got to get Jadarian Price the ball because he's Jadarian Price. We said, nope, we're going to go into pass mode, and that's going to mean Ainias Williams, our best pass blocker, who he actually didn't block well in this game, but he's our best pass blocker and he's our best pass catcher. Ainias Williams is going to get a lot of snaps in this game. It's the right thing to do. I actually don't think that had anything to do with the health of Jeremiah Love. I don't think that had anything to do with Jadarian Price. I think that just said, yep, they are saying you got to beat us with your passing game, and we're just taking away the run. Okay, we'll figure out a way to beat you with the pass game. So I thought it was really great balance. We didn't turn into an air raid. We didn't go away from whatever our identity is with, Riley Leonard and him being mobile and him staying involved in the run game. But we were flexible with what the defense was giving us, and we weren't forcing something that wasn't working. If anything, I thought we maybe forced it a little too long in the first half. I think it was pretty clear the run game was not clicking early on in this game. And then we got the pass game going. We got them on their heels. We went right back to the run in the second half. Like we just talked about starting off the second half with 4 straight runs. And so I thought that balance and flexibility by Denbrock called a really, really good game.
Agree. And that's what you see with great offensive coordinators. Obviously, you have a plan going in, but when the plan isn't going exactly as you expected, in this case, we weren't getting as much production from the run, you're not so stubborn that it affects your pride and you're not willing to change. Denbrock, to his credit, kept his wits about him, went into halftime and said, okay, look, this isn't working exactly as we thought. What are the adjustments that we can make to put our offense in a better position to succeed moving forward? And those adjustments worked fantastically.
Mm-hmm.
The other point I want to call out here, we already mentioned it a couple times, but I'm going to call it out more explicitly. That's the middle 8. It's an area that we've excelled in all year, and we won it today 10-0. It's a key reason we've had the run that we've had this year. It was critical against Georgia, and it was critical again against Penn State. I think you really see what your coaching staff is made of in that middle eight, because this is situational football. A lot of times you're running a 2-minute drill. It really comes down to how well coached your team is. Are they going to avoid mistakes that kill drives? And do you have good enough play calling to come up with wrinkles that can keep the defense on their heels and move downfield in a challenging time constrained situation? And we've excelled at this all year. We excelled again today, and that's a perfect example, I think, of a stat that will tell you that this coaching staff is one of the best in the country.
Absolutely. And then the last one that, again, I'm staying on my Mike Denbrock horse here, third downs. We were 11 for 17 on third down in this game, and a lot of that was long yardage situation. We converted a lot of third and longs, and it's an area we've stunk at this year, right? Like, you got to have elite wide receivers and a passing attack, and that's just not the strength of this Notre Dame team. And so it was an area for struggle. Credit Riley Leonard, credit these receivers, credit Mitch Evans. We came up with a lot of big third and long conversions in this game. And on the other side, Penn State was 3 for 11 on third down. So I thought that third down battle really won the game. I thought Denbrock put his guys in a position to have a shot on third and long. I get it, they're low probability plays, but he just kept cooking and came up with great play calls to put us in a position to succeed. So switching gears a little bit from what we put in that coaching and adjustments and matchups bucket, there's just an entire unit we have to spend time talking about, and it's the secondary. The Notre Dame secondary was the best unit on the field. 0 receptions for Penn State wide receivers. 0 receptions from the wide receivers. And I get it, Penn State doesn't have the greatest wide receivers of all time, but to pitch a shutout in the semifinals with your season on the line, you're back against the wall, you're trailing, like just everything about Leonard Moore, Xavier Watts, Adon Schuler, Clark, Hurd, Christian Gray. That unit has been so special all year long, hasn't skipped a beat when Ben Morrison's gone down. And then they played their best game of the year. What a phenomenal performance by that unit. Mike, I'm curious. I thought Tyler Warren was as good as advertised. How would you grade out how he played in this game and how we were able to limit him?
You're exactly right. So he's projected as a first round pick, top tight end in the country, top tight end in the draft, and he was exactly as advertised. Someone like that, they're going to get some production no matter what. You just can't get around it. They're too good of a player. I think he actually was even better than I expected. I knew he was great, but there were certain plays where he just was such a bulldozer, so hard to bring down, so fast for someone that size, great hands. That yeah, I was extremely impressed with him. So with someone like that, the key is to just limit them. You don't want them to blow the game open. It's similar to Abdul Carter, right? You're not going to be able to completely shut them down, but you want to be able to limit them and keep them from completely tilting the game to an extent to where it dramatically swings in your opponent's favor. And we did that. Look, he certainly got his. He had 7 targets, 6 catches for 72 yards. Very efficient. We mentioned that Penn State utilizes him in many different facets of the game. So in addition to the passing game, they utilized him in the run game. He had 2 runs for 21 yards. Again, there wasn't like a ton of explosiveness, right? He didn't do anything that just completely, again, blew the game open. He was productive, but we were able to keep him in line. So I thought we did a good job. We mentioned going into this game that Notre Dame had been effective at defending tight ends all year. Of course, we called out that Warren is a completely different animal. And so while we were optimistic, we would have to see what the results actually were once we got to the game. So overall, look, I was impressed. I think a player that profile who's this good, to be able to keep him in check that much, to be able to limit him from just completely exploding. We mentioned his stats against USC. I think he had like 200 yards or something crazy like that. We didn't let him get anything close to that. And when you combine that with what we did for the rest of the pass game, overall, just a phenomenal performance. I'll call out Christian Gray here again, in coverage on 30 routes, targeted 44 times. So really they were trying to avoid him for most of the game. 2 catches for 24 yards. And then of course the greatest interception in Notre Dame history. So look, phenomenal performance from Christian Gray. He's been money in the biggest moments. Leonard Moore, his partner in the secondary, he was also in coverage on 30 routes, only targeted 4 times, 1 catch for 6 yards. So these guys just completely shut down the passing game. We just talked about Drew Aller, really struggled for this entire game. one of his worst performances in his career. Only had 139 yards, 52% completion percentage, 43 Pro Football Focus grade, and I mentioned that his passing grade was even lower than that. Any way you want to cut it, the secondary was the best unit on the field. I saw a lot of Penn State fans, reporters, people in the media, when they were trying to analyze this game beforehand, they were stacking up which units had the advantage. And a point that they kept making is that they felt that Penn State had the advantage, maybe perhaps in more position groups than Notre Dame. They certainly acknowledged that Notre Dame's secondary was the better unit versus the Penn State secondary, but I don't think that they properly factored in quite how effective the Notre Dame secondary is. I don't think they chalked up how big of an advantage it is, and that was a massive swing this game. Honestly, that I would say our production and performance from the secondary, I think that was worth probably position group advantages in three spots. That's about how impactful it was.
Yeah, and I want to break down the interception. It's my second film breakdown. This one also courtesy of Dan Orlovsky, breaking this down on Twitter. And the thing to point out is how well every single player on Notre Dame's defense executed. And Al Golden said in an interview after the game, it was the first time they showed this coverage and blitz combination in the game. Fourth quarter, 60th, 70th play of the game, and you're running out of different coverage than you have all game. Talk about trust in your team to go execute, and they absolutely did. So let me start on the ball on the side opposite of where the action happened with Christian Gray. So Tyler Warren runs an out route, very well covered, and that was very clearly the first read for Drew Aller. And our safety, Adon Schuler, comes crashing down. So Adon Schuler is running towards Warren, but he's running an out route, so Schuler's actually never, ever going to get there. The two other guys covering on that side of the ball are Leonard Moore and Jordan Clark. I almost said Ryan Clark, Jordan Clark. And they both did textbook coverage where Schuler is running basically between those two routes. So Schuler is now running down between Leonard Moore and Jordan Clark. And Leonard Moore and Jordan Clark, it's kind of like the old basketball analogy of keep your guy between you and the ball. So you're always between you and the ball. It's actually a little opposite for corners where they always want their wide receiver between them and the safety. So if Leonard Moore is guarding a guy on the outside, he wants to force his wide receiver to stay inside of him and Leonard Moore be towards the sideline so that the safety Schuler coming down is on the other side of the wide receiver. So what that does is Drew Aller now can't throw to the outside because Leonard Moore's there, and he might be able to throw to the inside, but he's not sure because that safety's lurking. And then on the other side, Clark is covering in the slot, and he stays on the inside. So he's covering the inside guy. He stays on the middle of the field side of his receiver, pushing his receiver to the outside. So now same thing, it goes Clark, that wide receiver, and Schuler crashing down. And what that does is it lets Adon Schuler in Drew Aller's eyes be helping cover three different players. And Schuler can't cover them all for sure. But because of the technique that the cornerbacks used on that side, it let Adon Schuler take up that entire side of the field. And so now Drew Aller has to move off of his first, second, and third progression. So amazing textbook coverage and positioning by the cornerbacks, not letting their hips get turned, maintaining leverage, and staying on the opposite side so that they can be bracketing that wide receiver with safety help and letting a safety turn into three defenders in the eyes of Drew Aller. Awesome stuff to start the play. Then you got to go to the pressure. We show a three-man front and we show two linebackers lurking. We had Jalen Sneed, and I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe the other is Jack Kaiser. And they both start the play in a double spy situation, which basically means one of them looks like they're the running back spy and one of them looks like they're quarterback spy. And so both are just sort of floating 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage, almost as if they're in zone. And it looks like we're bringing a three-man rush. So in Drew Aller's eyes, he's now seeing bracket coverage with max coverage on the left in his first three progressions, and he's only seeing three rushers. Okay, I've got time. And on about a 1.5 second delay, Jalen Sneed breaks off of being the running back spy and blitzes the quarterback. By the way, also completely confused the Penn State offensive line. So the Penn State offensive line now goes into double teams on the three rushers, but Jalen Sneed comes in a 1.5 seconds late, but completely untouched and forces a throw. And now you're Drew Aller. You don't have time to actually assess that fourth progression. So he gets a quick look at the fourth progression. His receiver's not in terrible position. He grips it and rips it. Snead alters the throw a little bit, doesn't really let him get his feet set. And it is an awesome, I guess I'll call it a delay blitz, but it's a delay blitz with four guys. So Al Golden is able to dial up pressure without having to bring 5-6 blitzers. And then Christian Gray does the rest. He's in excellent position. He knows he has safety help on the other side of the field. Xavier Watts is sitting above him. He knows he can take an aggressive angle, breaks on the ball, diving catch. Like that will get all of the highlight accolades. But I just described 4 or 5 other guys on the opposite side of the field playing NFL level football, like playing an NFL level play call by Al Golden, but getting college guys to execute it at an NFL level. And if any of those guys miss, if any of those guys screw that up, either A, Drew Aller has a wide open throw on the other side without really safety help being there because we brought the safety crashing down. That's big time trouble. And B, we're just not getting home on pressure. And if he has more time like that guy, he's going to be able to read it and at least not throw an interception, if not have more time to go find another option. So textbook execution by that entire team, putting Christian Gray in a position to have a career-defining moment.
Yep. And one more detail on the linebackers. So both of them had the same read, essentially. You mentioned they were in a position where they were spies, essentially. Basically, if the running back ran to their side, then they were a running back spy for the running back. But if the running back didn't go to their side, then they blitzed. And so what happened here is the running back went to,
Yep.
we're assuming Kaiser. So Kaiser picked him up as a spy, and Snead, that was his green light to blitz the quarterback, which he did effectively. So both made great reads there, executed it perfectly. Just any way you want to cut up that play, it seems like every position executed exactly how they were supposed to. Now, we're going to get into some callouts here on some other plays, some other players. I'm going to start with Anais Williams. We've already touched on some of his performance already, but he had 7 touches for 83 yards. Very timely ones, very impactful plays this game. The most notable was that wheel route that we called out. Something that we actually hadn't called out yet was that it was on Kobe King. So it was a great play call, but then it was also on Kobe King. So it kind of hits 2 of those big adjustments and nuances on Denbrock. And again, Brett, as you mentioned earlier, it was after 4 straight runs. So what happened here is then you get Penn State to creep up. They're leaning into run protection. We then put Williams in motion to the outside, and then we saw that Kobe King was following him. So that, to us, that was a sign that we knew that we had man coverage. And you know that Denbrock, leading up to this week, was just drilling into Leonard that if we can get man-to-man coverage with Kobe King, who's not effective in pass coverage, on a running back with no safety help because of the run support in this situation, you got to take that shot every single time. And we did. And Williams ran a great route. There's still pretty good coverage on it, but we had some space there. But there was enough of a window where if Riley Leonard made a great throw, you could get a good play. And that's exactly what happened. Riley Leonard dropped it in a bucket, and we got a big play that helped us move downfield and get a touchdown right when we needed it.
Yeah, and then I'm going to take my victory lap on the next one. Jaden Greathouse goes over 100 yards receiving. The first time all year Notre Dame went with a 100-yard receiver in a game. And if you go back a few episodes, Mike and I made our bold predictions of things we would see in the playoff. And I think the first bold prediction so far was a 100-yard receiving game for Jaden Greathouse. So an amazing game for him. And, you know, it's interesting. Everyone talks about like, oh, Penn State's guy fell down on the play. No way. That's like saying if Kyrie Irving puts, you know, someone in the spin cycle and breaks their ankles in basketball, someone says, oh, well, if only Kyrie Irving didn't get that open shot because the guy fell over. Like Jaden Greathouse ran a great explosive route, took a hard juke inside, and it made the cornerback fall down. Like that was an induced, busted coverage that got Jaden Greathouse so open. I also think this is my third and final film breakdown. I think this play call by Mike Denbrock was phenomenal. And so this is credit Greg Flaming. Also go check him out, Flammang. He is one of my favorite Notre Dame guys to follow on Twitter. He broke down this one. And I think it's really important. This was after 4 straight runs. And then we finally stopped going no huddle. Line back up at the line of scrimmage in a run formation, and Penn State brings in a run defense, right? So we've now already got some mismatches on the field here where they're going run heavy defense. And we have double crossers on the short side of the field. So the linemen lined up closest on the hash, closest to the short side of the field. We have two wide receivers over there that both run crossers the other way. And then from the wide side of the field, next to Greathouse, we have Jordan Faison running a crosser the other way. And in college football, this looks like those old pick plays, right? That you can't really do anymore, but you still try to create enough traffic and confusion and get some separation. So we have three crossers running across each other. And both safeties who are already creeping down in run support are both thinking, oh, this is where I need to help because they're creating a lot of traffic and a lot of confusion. And if you start seeing a bunch of crossers, safeties, that's cue like, okay, that's where I've got to focus my attention. Interestingly, if you slow this down, that I think might, I don't know if that was our 1, 2, and 3 reads or not, but it looked like a bunch of decoy because coming out of that, Jeremiah Love ran that same exact wheel route as Anais Williams did a few drives earlier that we just talked about and got, I don't know if it was Kobe King, but got a linebacker on him and immediately is waving his hand up like Randy Moss style, like, get me the ball. I'm going to go burn this guy. Like he's covered, by the way. Like the guy's running with him and Jeremiah Love is like putting his arm up like, nope, I'm going to run by this guy and was open. So I actually, because the safeties crashed down, no safety help, Jeremiah Love was like wide open streaking down the other side of the field. So I actually think if you remove Jaden Greathouse from this entire play, Denbrock goes double pull, single pull, run, gets them thinking 7, 8 guys in the box, throws a bunch of commotion at the middle of the field that pulls the safeties down and slips out his running back for a deep route. I actually think that was the play design the entire way and was 7 points. Like it was a layup on the other side. Now you have all of that happening, and on the other side, Jaden Greathouse gets some of the best separation we've seen all year. Like he just completely breaks the guy's ankles. He falls over, wide open, busted coverage, walk in 54-yard touchdown. But I think that's worth slowing down for the beauty of what Mike Denbrock brings. You can sit and ask, well, why don't we do that all the time? Why can't we draw these up all the time? And you're waiting for that element. You're balancing your tendencies. You're setting it up. You're seeing how they're reacting. You're seeing, hey, when I run crossers throughout the game, how are their safeties reacting? Hey, when I run Jeremiah Love on a wheel route, do they stay in man coverage or do they drop out into zone? And you're figuring out those tendencies throughout the game, and then you spring one. You're figuring out ways to give your offense an easy way to get 7 points. I get it. You can still go execute, grind it out, make tough throws, find 5 yards here, 6 yards there, and go march down a field. But our offensive coordinator in this game gave us layups to go and score points against a top 5 defense, against a defense that is toe-to-toe with Al Golden. Like this is a phenomenal Penn State defense. And Al Golden and Mike Denbrock set us up for 14 easy layup second half points. That doesn't happen against elite defenses. Like if you think about Notre Dame, we haven't given up 14. Oh man, we just screwed up. There's 14 easy points. Like that just doesn't happen against elite defenses. And Jaden Greathouse, of course, makes it look wide open. But everything else in that play design was a beautiful setup by Mike Denbrock.
Definitely. He drew it up perfectly. We got, assuming Love was our first option there, we put Love in exactly the situation that we wanted him to be in, and it just would have required a good throw by Riley Leonard. But even with all that happening, Greathouse just made such a play that it didn't even matter, and we were able to get an even better look just based on great personal execution. All right, so let's move into Riley Leonard and talk about him more directly. So I thought he had a couple bad plays, no question. He had those 2 interceptions. But I thought overall, we saw continued development from him as a passer. I thought he had some really great throws, and I think our passing game really showed up when it needed to. So I'll talk a little bit more about those interceptions. The first was 3rd and long, and he was being aggressive. He was trying to convert on 3rd down. He was trying to make a play happen there. And the way it ended up working out is it ended up essentially kind of being like a bad punt. Penn State got favorable field position, but it wasn't such great field position that they were automatically in field goal range or anything like that. I think they got the ball on like their own 40-yard line. So not the worst case scenario. Could have been a lot worse. The other interception was just a bad read. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. It was a great play call. We actually had 2 guys who were wide open, including Love in the flat. I think this was a scenario where Leonard, I think it almost seemed like he had kind of decided where he was going with the ball when it was snapped. And he just didn't move his head, just focused on the first read, and Penn State picked up on that. And look, I don't even think it was that awful of a read if you rewatch the play. There was a really good drop zone and coverage. Dennis Sutton, that was a defensive end that we called out going into this game. Super athletic. I think there was, from Riley Leonard's perspective, he's watching that play develop. He sees a little bit of a window and he's thinking, okay, there's no way that this guy is athletic enough to make a play on it. Turns out he was. He dropped back 15 yards into coverage and made a heck of an interception. So this is a scenario where I think Leonard focused a little bit too much on his first read. That tipped off their defensive end. But even with that, Sutton made an incredibly athletic play, and Leonard certainly underestimated his athletic ability there.
Yeah,
So,
there's times where quarterbacks misread and don't see a defender. And then there's times a quarterback sees a defensive end playing deep drop coverage. Deep 15, 20 yards downfield drop coverage. And you're like, all right, I'm going to take Mitch Evans over this. There's no way that defensive end is
yeah,
like going to slide back 15 yards into cover. And he did. And sometimes you got to tip your hat.
totally, totally. So, yeah, I think he's probably watching that and he's like, all right, yeah, look, I could have been a little bit more careful. I could have executed. I could have led the defense elsewhere by kind of looking around and not making it so obvious where I was going. But yeah, heck of an athletic play. I mean, look, like we said earlier this episode, Penn State has had a lot of just tip your cap moments. This is one of them. But overall, look, Riley Leonard, putting aside those two interceptions, he had an 84% adjusted completion percentage, which adjusts for drops and throwaways. 9 first downs, massive plays on third down. Leonard converted 4 third downs in the second half. So situationally, when we really needed a big play to keep drives moving, Leonard was consistently making big plays. And these were tough situations. A key aspect going into this game is that we had to avoid third and long situations just because their pass rush is so effective. You're just going to give them an opportunity to just tee off on the quarterback. Well, we got into a number of those situations and we actually handled them pretty well. A lot of credit goes to Mike Denbrock, obviously, but a lot of credit goes to Riley Leonard here. So I think it's when we were in less advantageous situations, Riley Leonard was still able to make big plays. And that was a key aspect to us winning this game.
For sure. I mean, I even think, we had the really big touchdown that happened just at the start of the fourth quarter. There was a 3rd and 9. Another, I'm not going to go into a ton of detail on this one, but again, go check out Greg Flaming. He broke this one down. And it's 3rd and 9 at around 40. It's not 2-down territory. And 5 plays later is where we went and got the big pass interference on them. Jane Thomas had the big end around 18-yard run, and then Jeremiah Love's epic 2-yard run. That gets set up because Riley Leonard reads that we whiffed on a blitz. Anais Williams completely doesn't pick up the blitz. He's under pressure. On the other side, Jugasaw got, held his own, but got pushed back in. So then actually tripped Emil Wagner, which freed up Abdul Carter. So like Riley Leonard's got nowhere to go in this play. And we talk all the time about having blitz breaker routes. There's got to be one read that when you see blitz is coming and protection's not picked up, it's like bang, you're trusting it and you're getting it out of your hand. And we talked all year. Riley Leonard struggled at that. Riley Leonard has struggled at saying, I'm going to hang in the pocket and I'm just going to grip and rip the slant router. I'm going to grip and rip the flat router. I'm going to grip and rip the whatever the blitz breaker is. And he'll either get way mobile and try to avoid sacks, or he'll just throw a really bad pass and effectively throw it away. Doesn't take mistakes, doesn't take a lot of sacks, doesn't throw a lot of interceptions, but doesn't convert on those blitz pickups when he's under pressure. And here, his blitz breaker was clearly a seam route to Jaden Greathouse. And everyone else was covered on this play, especially because it was early. Like the blitz got to him right away. And Greathouse again won. He created 2 yards of separation on this play, got free from his guy. And importantly, like we said before, he got free from his guy opposite of the safety. So it went Greathouse, cornerback, safety help. The cornerback wasn't able to keep Greathouse between the corner and the safety. It was the exact opposite of what Notre Dame did that set up the Christian Gray touchdown. So Jaden Greathouse not only gets separation, but does it with awesome technique to avoid safety help. And then Leonard makes a really good throw. Tough catch. It was contested. He high pointed the ball really well. He threw it where only Greathouse could go and get it. And then Greathouse went and high pointed the ball, timed his jump perfectly, comes down with a 17-yard conversion on 3rd and 9. We score a touchdown 5 plays later. That is like next level stuff that honestly, we haven't seen a lot this year. We haven't seen a lot from Riley Leonard. We haven't seen a lot from Notre Dame wide receivers. So Jaden Greathouse credit to you, Riley Leonard, credit to you for stepping in, hanging in there in pressure, taking a hit, delivering a great ball, trusting your reads. That is Notre Dame playing peak football. Like that is us peaking at the right time of the year. I don't know how that translates against Ohio State. I'm not sitting here saying I think we're going to go blow out Ohio State because we're playing our best football at the right time. But those are some detailed plays we just haven't seen this year. And it was the game-changing plays by Riley Leonard and Jane Greathouse that I thought were awesome. Our last one on player shoutouts, I'll be really quick on this one. Jack Kaiser, the sixth-year captain, the guy who's now played more Notre Dame football games than anyone else, leading tackler, 8 tackles in the game, only 1 missed tackle, should have had an interception, but the refs took it away. I just thought he was all over the place. I thought that if they don't take away the Schuler pass interference, I guess we can talk about the refs in a second. Jack Kaiser is the player of the game. Like he's the one that had the game defining play. And so super, super solid and think he deserves a shout out. Mike, I'll let you do it. I thought the refs were fine. I thought there were a couple big moments in this game. I actually don't know if they got the plays wrong, but like situationally, it was just like head scratching that's when you're going to, apply the ticky tack rule book, etc. I'm curious, what did you think about the Christian Gray holding penalty on his first interception of the night? What did you think about the Aiden Schuler pass interference and anything else we should cover about our favorite moments of the game with the officials?
I'm glad that we can talk about this with a win, because I think if we'd lost, maybe the perspective here would be a little bit different. But starting with the holding on Christian Gray, I'm going to talk about another holding call before that. So there was a run that Penn State had where they got the
Oh,
touchdown.
that one was bad.
Yeah, so let's start with that one. So there was clearly a hold on Christian Gray. The guy was grabbing his shoulder pad visibly. You could see it was like
pulled
this,
it off
basically.
the pad.
Yeah. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can see he was like pulling it like this. Very noticeable. And Terry McCauley, who's the NBC rules
right
analyst,
in front of the ref, by the way. That's actually the ref was in great.
3 refs.
I get it if refs don't see something because for whatever reason they got out of position or whatever reason they're looking. Like I get it. That's hard. Like I'm sympathetic to that, but this was like broad daylight.
Yeah. Look, and so that was Terry McCauley. He'll tweet about, I guess, what you'd call controversial calls in games, and he'll give his perspective. So his perspective on this was obviously a hold, but what he was more blown away is what you were just talking about right here, Brett, is how the heck could not only one ref miss this, but 3, because they had clear line of sight. He just thought it was absolutely inexcusable, and he thought it was just a total failure of the entire officiating crew. So that one was brutal, right? The other one was the holding on the Christian Gray interception. Yeah, so look, that call was correct. Christian Gray, per the rule, he definitely did it. I obviously, it was frustrating at the time because it felt like we got a critical play at a moment when we really could have needed it. But the call was correct. I thought
that one felt like you had to flag it. That one I felt like you had to flag it. Yep.
For sure. The second PI in Schuler, where Kaiser got the interception. So I thought that was incredibly weak. And that's the one where if you're just taking the pulse of everyone in the media, that was essentially the unanimous opinion here. Aller threw into triple coverage.
Except, by the way, for Greg McElroy. Greg McElroy thought it was a great call in the broadcast, but everyone else thought it was terrible.
Yeah. You're right. And then,
they got
the rules analyst, and he was like, "Oh yeah, that's a good call." But then literally everybody else that I saw thought it was a terrible call. So look, there was definitely some contact, and he didn't turn his head around, but that does not, in and of itself, make it PI. I think when I saw the replay, I was actually pretty surprised how limited the contact was. It was pretty weak. It was their big tight end. It didn't really seem to impact his ability at all to make a play on the ball. In fact, we were in a much better position to make a play on the ball there. So, I think that was very controversial, a big time play call that hurt us. And then they scored shortly thereafter. So that was a big play that swung in Penn State's favor. Look, that was obviously not a good call. I think there are always, in any big game, there are always a couple plays that you can point at where the officiating crew makes mistakes. Now that we're kind of wrapping this all together, there are really only a couple truly bad ones. It wasn't like there are 10 plays. We're really talking about 2 here. So overall, these were critical plays, impactful for sure. So I can't say the officiating crew had a great performance because there's a conversation about the officiating crew after the game, but I don't think it's quite as bad as people were making it out to be. Look, we still won the game. It wasn't enough to tilt the balance to where Penn State won the game. And certainly there were, I saw a lot of Penn State fans complaining that there was a lot of holding by the Notre Dame offensive line against Abdul Carter that wasn't called. So it's like anything; these things kind of go both ways. I think there were just a couple ones that seemed particularly bad, but it really was just two at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think the interception stands out so much because it was such a game swinging momentum play. But um, I agree that I think fans on both sides weren't happy, which then usually means like the refs do an okay job. Um, I also the other thing I'll say about the Aiden Schuler I actually think I have a bigger problem with the rule book that when you have a ball underthrown by 7 yards and the offensive player has no chance of catching it, but they just stop and the defender runs into them in a natural route, you call PI on what was never going to be caught anyways. I just don't like rewarding bad football. And that's rewarding bad football. But what I also really don't like is that officials just default to throwing that flag. So whenever there's an underthrown ball, the wide receiver has no chance of catching it. Every single time they will stop. The defender has no chance to turn around. And whether there's a ton of contact or no contact, the wide receiver will go flailing to the ground. And then the ref just defaults to the penalty without actually watching was there contact. And that's what I didn't like about this play. I hate the rule, but I hate the default flag that comes with the rule that you still need to watch. Like, well, was there actual meaningful contact? And there just wasn't on this play.
Yeah,
Um,
RG3 actually. So he had a tweet, and I thought this summarized exactly what you were saying right there, Brett. He's like, we should make a rule where if you throw into triple coverage and it's underthrown, you can't throw a pass interference in that situation. It just feels like you're bailing out a terrible play by the quarterback, which is exactly what happened here.
Yep. And then the last narrative that I wanted to talk about to wrap up this game was James Franklin, just in general, and James Franklin and Marcus Freeman. I mentioned it at the outset. I think James Franklin getting ridiculed as not being good in big games and everything else. And I'm like, look, there's just not a lot of coaches that have played 20 top five teams. Like, he's been around this sport for a really long time. He's been in a lot of really big games. Has won 10, 11 games a ton. I think he's a really good coach. I think he's got a little bit of the Brian Kelly jerk in him that I think rubs media and his fan base the wrong way. I'm not going to condone that. Like, I think you should be a good person. I think he can be a little bit of a jerk. And that happened again in this game, where in the pregame press conference, they get both coaches together for these big bowl games, basically to take a photo together. Because they're there, the press asks him 5 questions. And the other coach is sitting next to you. So, like, say non-answer answers and just say, yep, looking forward to a game. I got a ton of respect for Notre Dame. Can't wait to get out there. Hope our guys play well, and move on. James Franklin goes out of his way, who's bald, important stat here, and is in his 50s, and says, yeah, I got a little more experience on Marcus Freeman. I think he's 38. Marcus, love your hairline. And you might as well have had James Franklin pat Marcus on the head and go, oh, hey, buddy, like, welcome to the big leagues. And then proceeded to rant on everyone should be independent, but no offense. Sorry, everyone should join a conference, but no offense to Notre Dame. And I just think we need to do it to make the playoff committee's job easier. And we need to do it because playing in conference championships is more difficult than not. But no offense to Notre Dame. I think he said no offense to Notre Dame, like more than any other quote or no offense to Marcus, or this isn't a jab at them. He said some version of that a ton. And Freeman just sat there, was pleasant, was quiet. They asked him to follow up, and he just like clearly wanted to say something and said, I trust, our athletic director, Pete Beviqua. I trust Father Dowd. They're going to do what's best for the university. And I'm just here to coach football games. And you tell me what game to play and I'll go and coach it. And just like didn't really address it. He went back to the locker room and told his team immediately and said, I'm effing angry. And the entire team was like furious about it. And we used that moment for locker room material. Like, the one thing that coaches know not to do is create bulletin board material to fire up the other team. And Jeremiah Love called it out. I think Jack Kaiser called it out. Like, every other player getting interviewed after the game was like, oh yeah, we haven't seen Freeman that mad all year. Like, he was ready to run through a brick wall. Like, he was angry. Like, you just can't do that. If you're the other guys, Xavier Watts was in an interview with Pete Sampson talking about it. And so you can't do that if you're James Franklin. But I love Marcus Freeman. I actually don't even know if Marcus Freeman is angry about it or not. He seems like a guy that isn't going to get, upset over personal slights. But the fact that he channeled that anger towards the locker room and got him to bring that intensity onto the field, but in a positive way, not hot-headed, not taking personal fouls, not doing anything else other than going out and playing violent, savage football. I love that about Marcus Freeman. And James Franklin, what are you doing, man? So another, I thought, great storyline in this. I really, I really hope Lou Holtz shuts up with Ryan Day for the next week. Last time we played Ohio State, Lou Holtz is firing up bulletin board material for Ryan Day, even though he's, retired 30 years ago. So Lou, if you're out there, I love you, buddy. But please save your trash talk for after the season when we win a natty, and let's not put bulletin board out there for the Ohio State team.
Yeah. I don't think there's any chance that's going to happen. I think Lou Holtz I think he's going to be coming out pretty hot. I think I've already seen key themes for the Notre Dame Ohio State National Championship, and people are saying it's Lou Holtz versus Ryan Day.
I
But
love it.
that's spot on. Look, I watched the clips of Franklin talking in that press conference, and Freeman, look, he's too polite, he's too professional to actually say anything that would indicate that he's upset. But if you just watch his body language, he definitely looked. I thought he looked upset, noticeably, and he looked like he wanted to get out of there. And like you said, Franklin basically was totally patronizing him. It's like, hey, congratulations, congrats on making it this far, but now you get to play a real team. That was essentially the vibe. The irony with Franklin's independence comments is the last time Penn State won a national title, guess what? They were independent. Now, I'm not saying that Penn State shouldn't have joined the Big Ten, because I think that actually was the right call for them. But to kind of go on such a rant that it's inconceivable, it's not good for the sport. It's inconceivable that a team should maintain their independence when the most recent high that your program has had at the highest level is when you're an independent. I just think that makes the whole point kind of fall flat on its face a little bit. So
Yeah.
look, I think Franklin, I don't know, is he a jerk? Is he misunderstood? That's always a question. I think you're right. There's a little bit of the BK in him. He gets a lot of kind of like that unlikable feedback that we were used to with Brian Kelly, which fortunately now we are experiencing the opposite of with Marcus Freeman. Somehow Marcus Freeman has made Notre Dame America's team, like truly, which is hard to imagine. We have Michigan fans who I think are actually going to be rooting for us over Ohio State. Although I think that probably says more about their hatred
Imagine
for Ohio
how
State.
bad this game is for Michigan. Like, if you're Michigan fans right now, you just got to be like, what is happening? Like, how are we winning a championship a year ago and our two rivals are playing for the title now? But
Yeah, it's
my, how the tables have turned.
Connor Stalions karma, right? I think let's hope that the
Exactly.
next five title
Not
games are
karma.
going
It's just they don't have the Connor Stallions edge. They
to
don't
yeah,
know the
it's
play calls that the other team is running.
yeah, wait, when you build the program on knowing the other team's playbook, not having that anymore, that's a form of karma.
Yeah.
So hopefully Notre Dame and Ohio State, we're in the next 5 title games. That would be pretty bad for college football, but it'd be pretty brutal for Michigan. It would be pretty great for Notre Dame
Yeah.
and Ohio State, obviously. So the last thing I want to touch on, Brett, is advanced stats, because that is a key aspect. That is a pillar of this podcast, no question. For these playoffs, they've been pretty spot on. I think that's an important point to make here. So IU, it clearly called out that that was a talent mismatch. There were some areas that we thought Notre Dame could expose, and they did all night, and we totally overwhelmed IU. The advanced stats showed that Notre Dame should have a clear edge, and that was exactly how it played out. Now, with Georgia and Penn State, the advanced stats for those showed that it was going to be neck and neck. It was going to be a very physical dogfight. But Notre Dame did have havoc on its side. Although interestingly, Penn State, so that showed to our favor against Georgia, less so against Penn State, where Penn State had that edge. But generally, these games played out exactly as the advanced stats suggest they would, just very close rock fights. Penn State and Notre Dame, they're mirrors of each other. No obvious weaknesses. There are a few spots that you could try to take advantage of, like Kobe King and pass coverage. We mentioned Notre Dame's secondary. That was a clear strength for ours versus a weak Penn State wide receiver group. But then they had Warren, who was someone who could offset it. So basically, they suggested that these types of games would be 50-50 toss-up type games. And if you look at the post-game win expectancy for both of these games, Georgia and Penn State, that's essentially what it was. 59% post-game win expectancy for both, I believe, which is the type of game that, okay, we won, but Penn State or Georgia easily could have won these games too. It was just neck and neck, for most of the game.
An amazing run. We've got one more game here in Atlanta. I'll be at the game. We've got, I think we're up to 13 confirmed friends staying at our house and a bunch of other families staying with some relatives down the street. So we're ready to have a blast in Atlanta. We will be back with you for one more show before the championship game to preview that matchup with the Ohio State University. But until then, Irish beat Buckeyes.
Irish beat Buckeyes.